In today's lecture, we're going to be focusing on demand analysis. So at the end of this unit, you will be able to understand the importance of market and demand analysis in managing projects, in aligning all capital expenditure to serve and satisfy customer needs. You will also learn different methods of demand analysis, their comparative advantages as well as disadvantages. Also, increasing emphasis on accuracy in forecasting demands in the backdrop of fierce competition and changing customers' preferences. Last but not least, the impact of errors in forecast and relationship between operating cost of forecast and their accuracy. Emerging competition in marketplaces propelling management to hear the voice of their customers. To survive in the market, management have to be forward-looking and carry out market and demand analysis of products and develop strategic business policies. However, when it comes to working out methods and methodologies of demand forecasting, it presents a strange dilemma to the industry. Now, it has been said that you can never plan the future by the past. This is one kind of mindset that people adopt, but there's also another one that is voiced out by Patrick Henry, where he states that I know of no way of judging the future but by the past. So here is the big dilemma: what to use in our forecasting models, in our forecasting scenarios and equations. As an essential part of project formulation and appraisal, market and demand analysis is vital so that capacity and facility location can be planned and implemented in line with the market requirements. A major error in demand forecasts can throw painstaking capital expenditure on plant capacity and other hardware facility totally out of gear. Such decisions are not easily reversible. Forecast is an estimate of future events and trends and is arrived at by systematically combining past data and projecting it forward in a predetermined manner. Prediction is an estimate of future events and trends in a subjective manner without taking into account the past data. The subjective consideration may not emerge from any predetermined analysis or approach. So this is, to start the discussion, an idea, sort of a small definition of what is forecast all about and what is prediction all about. Market and demand analysis of various types are undertaken to meet specific requirements of planning and decision making. For illustration, short-term decisions in production planning, distribution, amongst others, and selling individual products would require short-term forecast, which normally is going to be of a duration of up to 1 year. This must be fairly accurate for specific product items. For long-term planning, time horizon ranging between 4 to 5 years are expected, as information required from demand analysis would be for broad product groups, for facilitating choice of technology, for example, machine tools and other hardwares, as well as their location. Now, just to put it some horizontal time frame, when we talk about short term, basically we infer to 1 year, right? When we talk about medium term planning decisions, we are talking about 2 to 3 years. And when we talk about long term decision, and this can go up to 4 to 5 years. Right? So longer-term forecasting is also undertaken to determine trends in technology development so as to choose the technology for backing up and funding any particular research or development sideways. Need for demand forecasting. All business planning starts with forecasting capital investment. For example, procurement of raw materials and production planning has to relate to demand forecasting. High volume, high technology mass production systems have further highlighted the importance of accurate demand forecast. Even in a batch type production, any major mismatch between forecast and manufacture will lead to higher capital tied up in finished product, which are slow in selling. So in the long run, in the end, you're going to be mobilizing too many capital in a specific business. So as a business person, as a businessman, you're going to find that your return on investment is going to be slower. Uncertainties in demand forecasting. Demand forecasting is the estimate of future demand. As the future is always uncertain, forecasting cannot be completely foolproof and accurate. However, the very process of forecasting demand in the future involves evaluating various forces and factors which may influence the demand. This exercise is very rewarding in itself as it enables the personnel to know about various market forces, the currents, the cross currents, and as well as the undercurrents relevant to the demand behavior. Levels of demand forecasting. Now, demand forecasting can be executed at various levels within the firm, industry, or even if we want to do it at both national as well as international level, forecasting of demand can be done. The first level we're going to consider is firm level. If the exercise aims at forecasting demand of firms, products locally, at state, region, or national level, it is a micro level. It is what we refer to as a micro level of demand forecasting. Sometimes forecasting are required for companies' products in specific industry or market segment. The second is industry level. Such a demand forecasting exercise will normally be focusing on an industry as a whole for a particular region and or a particular country. These forecasts may be undertaken by a group of companies or by a specific industry or trade association. The third is national level. Demand forecasts at national level include parameters in the like of national income, expenditure, index of industrial and or agricultural productions, amongst others. Estimating aggregate demand of products at national level will facilitate governmental decisions with respect to imports, exports, as well as pricing policies, amongst others. Last but not least, international level forecasting. Now, companies operating in multinational markets would require similar forecasting of demands for their products, trends in consumption at international level. Now, managerial economists play a leading role in masterminding these forecasts at firm, industry, national, and international levels. In terms of time frame for carrying up these forecasting, uh, it should be expected to vary from 1 to 8 years, and in rare circumstances, it may go up to 10 years, depending on the level. Now, what are the determinants of demand for capital goods? Capital goods are man-made equipment for the production of goods and series. Demand of consumer goods is autonomous and is forecast by direct measurements. However, demand forecast for capital goods is indirect and derived. Their demand is dependent upon profitability of the industries using this equipment and also on the ratio for production to installed capacity, which is also referred to as occupancy. For example, demand for cement manufacturing machinery will depend not only on the profitability of the cement industry, but also on the current surplus capacity in the industry. If the surplus capacity is low or negligible, one can expect major expansion of existing cement manufacturing units. Now, likewise, another example, when it comes to commercial vehicles, the demand for commercial vehicles will be dependent upon the growth of the nation. Basically, we're talking about the economic growth of the nation, the growth pattern of different modes of transport, that is, can be talking about rail, rivers, air, and sea, availability of bank finances for leasing, growth of replacement market of these commercial vehicles. All of these will influence the demand for such commodities. Criteria for a good forecasting method. Right, we talk about forecasting, how forecasting is going to help many industries, but what would be the criteria for a good forecasting method? So we're going to learn about the different methods, but for the moment, the criteria that's good for a good forecasting method would be. Now, the first criteria that is going to matter is the accuracy in forecast. Accuracy in forecast is measured in terms of past forecast against current sales and by the percentage of deviation from actual demand. It is important to not only check the accuracy of past forecast, but also the validity of assumptions in practice. Forecast, being future-oriented, cannot be always accurate, although accuracy is the most important criterion. Second criterion, plausibility of forecast. Forecast of demand must be reasonable, consistent, and plausible. Assumptions made should stand scrutiny, and techniques adopted must be commensurate. Explanatory note on these aspects must be available in the write-up on methods and methodology employed in forecasting. So the replicability of these models, of these data, is very important. Third criterion, economy of forecast. Forecasting exercise should not be expensive, whether in terms of efforts or cost. Additional cost of ways and means for improving the accuracy of forecast should not exceed the extra gain expected. Fourth criterion, quick results. Method of forecasting chosen. Now, we've got a lot of these forecasting methods we're going to discuss later on, but the method of forecasting that you're going to choose should be capable of yielding quick and useful results. If method selected takes far too long a time to yield accurate forecast, it may not be conducive for taking quick and effective decisions. So depending on how quick you want to make decision or the importance of taking quick decisions will dictate the type of forecasting method you're going to be adopting. Criterion number 5, availability and timeliness. Methodology of forecasting should be such that it can be easily updated when changes occur in the demand relationships. So this is something that once the system is being fine-tuned, the methodology is being fine-tuned for better result, so it shouldn't take much time to update. The sixth criterion is durability. Demand forecast should not be changed frequently. Durability of forecast is subject to the following two conditions. First, simple and reasonable relationship between price and demand, advertisement and sales, level of income and volume of sales should be entertained. Second criterion, stability of relationship between the above variables should be maintained. The last criterion is flexibility. Flexibility of forecast is an added advantage. It is desirable to be able to adjust coefficient of variables from time to time in order to cope with changing conditions. Methods of forecasting demand. Now we come to the gist of this particular lecture, where we're going to be looking at the different forecasting methods that exist out there. Now, to facilitate proper and reliable appraisal of investment proposal, we require a reasonably accurate forecast of demand. Starting with qualitative methods like survey of collective opinions, buyer's intention, Delphi approach and its variant, a number of quantitative methods also exist for the compilation and computation of demand forecast. Now, these quantitative and qualitative methods will be described next. Method number 1 is collective opinion survey. Sales personnel are closest to the customers and have an intimate feel of the market. Thus, they are most suited to assess consumers' reaction to companies' products. Herein, each salesperson makes an estimate of the expected sales in their respective area, territory, state, and/or even region. These estimates are collected, reviewed, and revised to take into account changes in design of the products, changes in features of the products, changes in selling price, projected advertising and sales promotion campaigns, as well as anticipated changes in competitors, marketing policies covering product, people, price, promotion, and place. Opinions of all managers involved at various levels of sales organization are also included in the survey. Thus, collective opinion survey forms the basic of market analysis and demand forecasting. Now, although this method is simple, direct, first-hand, and most acceptable, it, however, suffers from a number of weaknesses. Now, weakness number one, estimates are based on personal judgment, which may not be free from bias. Second weakness, adding together demand estimates of individual salespersons to obtain total demand of the country may be risky, as each person has knowledge about a small portion of the market only. Weakness number three, salespersons may not prepare the demand estimates with the requirements seriously and care. Weakness number four, owing to limited experience, usually in their employment, salesperson may not have the requisite knowledge and experience to do such kind of work. So, on the whole, this method may be useful for long-term forecast. It is also used for new products or new variant with an existing product. So this method is going to be more appropriate for these existing products. Method number two is survey of customers' intention. Now, this is another method of demand forecasting, which is basically about carrying a survey of what consumers prefer and intend to buy. If the product is sold to a few large industrial buyers, survey would involve interviewing these industrial buyers. If it is a consumer durable product, a sample survey is carried out for questioning a few representative consumers about what they are planning or intending to buy. It is neither realistic nor desirable to query all consumers either through direct contact or through printed questionnaire by mail. As you can see, this is going to be something very tedious and costly. These surveys serve useful purpose in establishing relationship between demand and price, demand and income of consumers, as well as demand and expenditure on advertisement. This method is preferred when bulk of the sales is to institutions and is industrial buyers, and only a few of them have to be contacted. All right, so when we are intending the sales to bulk, to institutions or industrial buyers, then when carrying out our survey, we're going to be having only a few people to interview or to get their intention. Disadvantages are that customers may not know total requirements. In some cases, they are not certain about the quantity they want to purchase. Besides, during shortages, there is a tendency to inflate their requirements. Survey method is not useful for households. Interviewing them is not only difficult, but also is an expensive process. These homeowners, households, they are not able to give precise idea about their intention, particularly when there are alternative products on the market. They are not able to decide whether they're going to go with product number one or product number two. So they are not they do not have the capacity to decide. Most of the time, you're going to find that They stick to tradition, they stick to their old mindset, so they go with previous product that have been there, that have been working for them. The third method is the Delphi method of demand forecasting. This is a very interesting method. It is a group process and basically aims at achieving a consensus amongst the members that you're going to be interviewing, or it is going to be a consensus that is to be reached among experts in the field. Now, since we are in demand and marketing, so basically our experts are to be in the field of marketing and demand forecasting, right? So in this particular method, which is based on getting consensus of the expert, right? So the expert would be basically providing expertise in analyzing the economic conditions, carrying out sample surveys of the market, as well as conducting opinion polls. Now, based on the above, demand forecast is worked out in the following steps. The coordinator sends out a set of questions in writing to all the experts that have been co-opted on the panel and who are requested to give, a written brief of what they expect. All right. Now, written predictions of experts are collated, edited, and summarized together by the coordinator. Now, based on the summary, coordinator designs a new set of questions and revert back to the same expert who will have to answer back again in writing. Coordinator repeats the process of collating, editing, and summarizing the processes for a few. It's like an iterative process. So steps 3 and 4 are repeated by the coordinator to experts with diverse background until consensus is reached. Right. So the aim, as we said earlier, was to reach a consensus, and they work until the consensus is finally reached. It is the coordinator that would know after how many iterations that the consensus has been reached. Now, in most cases, in most domains, in most fields of study, when Delphi technique has been used, normally after 3 to 4 iteration, consensus among experts was noted. If there is divergence of opinions and conclusion, coordinator has to sort it out through mutual discussions. Coordinator has to have the necessary experience and background, as he or she plays a key role in designing structured questionnaires and synthesizing the data. Direct interaction among experts is avoided, nor their identity is disclosed. Procedure also avoids interpersonal conflicts, as well as they are able to dominate the group. You're not going to get the people to interact amongst each other, because we want the expert opinion to be non-biased. Right? So this method is also used for technology forecasting. Now, as I said earlier, the Delphi technique has been used in many fields of study, project management, economics, even medicine. So it is a very interesting topic that you people may think about of using in your future dissertation. Method number 4, nominal group technique. This is a sort of a variant to the Delphi method of forecasting. Here, a panel of 7 to 10 experts is formed and allowed to interact. Here, interaction is allowed. They're allowed to discuss and rank all the suggestions in descending order as per the following procedure. Now, step 1, experts sit around a table in full view of one another and are asked to speak to each other. Step number 2, facilitator hands over copies of questionnaire needing a forecast, and each expert is expected to write down a list of ideas about the questions. Step number 3, after everyone has written down their ideas, the facilitator asks each expert to share one idea out of the list with the group. The idea shared is written on a flip chart which everyone can see. Step number 4, experts give ideas in rotation until all of them are written on the flip chart. No discussion takes place in this phase, and usually 15 to 25 ideas emerge from this format. Step number 5, in the next phase, experts discuss ideas presented by them. Facilitator ensures that all ideas have been adequately discussed. During discussions, similar ideas are combined and paraphrased appropriately. This reduces the number of ideas in the long run. Step number 6, after completing group discussions, experts are asked to give in writing ranks to ideas according to their perceptions of priority. So they come up with a ranked, they produce ideas first, then they combine the ideas to the maximum they can, and ultimately they have to come up with a prioritized list. All right, so they're going to rank the ideas in an orderly form. Now, so far, the above 4 methods are what we term as qualitative forecasting methods. Right? It is based on opinion, it is based on ideas, and that's it. Now, the remaining ones that we're going to discuss are what we refer to as the quantitative techniques for forecasting. The first one is simple average method. So among the quantitative techniques for demand analysis, simple average method is the first one that comes to one's mind. Herein, we take simple average of all past periods, simple monthly average of all consumption figures collected every month for the last 12 months, or simple quarterly average of consumption figures collected for several quarters in the immediate past. Thus, the simple average in terms of the formula is going to be equal to the sum of demands of all periods divided by the number of periods. So if we've collected data over 12 months, it is going to be the sum of demands collected over 12 months divided by 12 months. So you get the simple average. So this is the first method, quantitative method. The second method is the moving average method. Now, the method of simple average is faulted on account of the fact that all past periods are given same importance, whereas it is justifiable to accord higher importance to recent past periods. Moving average method takes a fixed number of periods, and after the elapse of each period, data for the oldest time period is discarded and the most recent past period is included. Whatever the period selected, it must be kept constant. It may be 3, 4, or 20 periods but once it is decided, we must continue with the same number of periods. So the moving average method is equal to the sum of demands of the chosen periods divided by the number of chosen periods. The next method is the weighted moving average. In moving average method, weighted given to the selected number of periods is same. right? So the weights given in the moving average period to the different periods is the same. This has been refined in this particular method. So we give weights to the periods. So this has been refined to include the weighted moving average, which allows varying weightages for demands in all periods. Depending upon the age of the period, uh, a certain weightage is given. So the weighted moving average is equal to weight number 1 applied to demand number 1 plus weightage number 2 applied to demand number 2, weightage number 3 applied to demand number 3, and so on and so forth, right? So this method has the advantage that it allows forecasters to compensate for some known trends in demand, right? So the weightages have to be decided by the forecast analyst, and this decision is critical to the accuracy of demand forecast. So this is the method of weighted moving average. The next method is the exponential smoothing method. Now, with the advent of computers and availability of different software packages, exponential smoothing methods have become popular. Besides, they do not require much data for storage, right? So not much data is required. I mean, the amount of computing power required and the amount of data produced that need to be stored is not significant. So these methods are distinguished from the weighted average method by the weight assigns weightages to each past period. Pattern of weightages assigned is exponential, right? And this is again calculated using specific software packages, right? So these methods are simple, and with the speed and accuracy of computers, these methods are increasingly used for determining quick and easy forecast within reasonable budgets. Next method is the adaptive exponential smoothing. If demand is not stable or there is no known pattern of demand, then an adaptive exponential smoothing may be appropriate. In this method, the weightage value is not fixed. After setting it initially, it is allowed to fluctuate over time in line with the changes in demand pattern. So basically, it is allowed to evolve, and you just give the initial value, and then it's going to iterate itself and change with time and conditions. Once again, decision of demand forecast in assigning different values to the weightage is critical. Next method, exponential smoothing with trend and seasonal data. So far, all the methods of forecasting have assumed the entire demand as a time series. In case there is a trend for a component of the demand, it can be forecast exponentially as a separate exercise. Similarly, seasonal component can be forecast separately. Thereafter, composite forecast can be obtained by synchronizing together the constant component, trend, as well as seasonal components. If the constant component of demand is 800, it can be adjusted for the trend component. The forecast inclusive of trend component can be thus calculated, all right? And one must assume the seasonal factor, which is normally taken as 90%, and the overall composite forecast will thus be determined by multiplying the seasonal factor with the trend component. The next method is what we refer to as double exponential smoothing. All right, so here in this particular method, sometimes when there's too much of instability in the time series, normally we refer to those instabilities as noise in between inverted commas. So in such cases, use of double exponential smoothing is normally suggested. It smooths the first order exponential smoothing forecast efficiently. So basically, uh, this method is normally used in the pharmaceutical industry. More precisely, it has extensively been used in forecasting the demands of drugs. The next method is projection by curve fitting. Every company compiles data over time for different products. If it is arranged graphically as we're going to see a trend, and this trend is going to establish a sort of a demand pattern. So most of the time you're going to get a parabolic curve. So a curve can be fitted to the past data. It may be a linear or curved linear relationship. We can determine a mathematical expression to express the the way the graph is evolving with time. So values of constant can also be worked for different groups of products, and an appropriate algebraic expression can be derived for the different products. Now, once a curve is fitted, projecting demand forecast is made simple. And when we talk about cost of such system, it's going to be at minimal cost. It's not going to be that expensive. The basic assumption is that past trend of change will continue in future also. Whenever pattern formula breaks down, so basically in this particular method, we use past data and we try to determine a trend. We try to determine a mathematical relationship between the data, and we use the data. Once we determine the equation, once we are able to establish the parameters, how the parameters are interlinked, we can use the equation to forecast our future demands. So this is all what this method is about. Now, the next one is something that many people already know. It is the regression analysis. So past data is used to establish a functional relationship between two variables. For example, demand for consumer goods has a relationship with disposable income of individual and family. Demand for tractors is linked to the agricultural income, and demand for cement, bricks, amongst others, is dependent on the value of construction contract at any time. So here forecasters collect data and build relationship through correlation and regression analysis of variables. Now this is a tool that you must have used in statistics, where you are to establish relationship between two variables. Right? So you use the regression analysis. Now the last method is what we refer to as econometric models. Now econometric models are more complex and comprehensive, as they interweave different factors together simultaneously. For example, demand for passenger transport is not only dependent on the population of the city, the geographical area, industrial units, but also on their locations, amongst others. It is not that easy to locate one single economic indicator for determining the demand forecast of a particular product. Invariably, a multi-factor situation applies. Econometric models, although complex, are being increasingly used for market analysis and demand forecast. Now, many systems exist out there. You can use system dynamics, right? Or you can use other systems like cellular automata. If you've got time, please go on the net and look for those two systems, system dynamics and cellular automata, which has some components of econometrics that you can use to establish certain of these forecasts, these relationship between different parameters that will enable you to forecast demands for specific projects. Now, errors in demand forecasting exist. Now, there is a Chinese proverb which says, to predict is hazardous, especially the future. Nevertheless, in industry, we cannot survive without prediction and forecast. Now, without, basically we are involved in a fierce competition amongst emerging markets, and it is a must to have accurate forecast. Now, accurate forecast is going to give a company, an industry, a competitive advantage over its competitors. Now, already it is hazardous to take short-term marketing decisions without undertaking opinion polls. Now here, forecast of consumer preferences trends are very important for the industry people. Forecasting error may be defined as the numeric difference between forecasted demand and actual demand. Now this is going to sort of determine how profitable is going to be your business venture, how profitable is going to be your product on the market. So this is the outcome. We've produced a model that is supposed to predict to a certain degree of accuracy the trend in the demand, and based on that you've invested and you want to reap the profit out of it. But unfortunately, we know that the future cannot be predicted 100% accurately, and we are prone to errors. Now, any method of forecasting yielding large errors is less desirable. So this is something very logical. Nobody would like to have a system that predicts with major discrepancies, with major errors. The following aspects that we're going to discuss are important in measuring the effectiveness of any method of forecasting. Now, mean absolute deviation. Now, this is a measure of the forecast error without regard to the direction of the error. That is, we don't look at whether it is negative or positive. So the mean absolute deviation is obtained using the expression sum of absolute values of forecast errors for all periods divided by the number of periods. So this is the mean absolute deviation. Absolute values of forecast errors absolute values of forecast errors are basically taken without algebraic sums. Mean absolute deviation, which is referred to as MAD, mean absolute deviation, is the average of the absolute values of forecast errors. Forecast errors are by themselves normally distributed, and there is a relationship between the mean absolute deviation and the standard deviation. If the forecast is reasonably accurate, forecast errors will be quite smooth. The above measure is then referred to as smooth mean absolute deviation, SMAD. Now, in such event, the standard deviation is going to be equal to 1.25 times the smoothed mean absolute deviation. Second, bias. Bias is less commonly used a measure for forecast errors. It takes into account the direction of errors, and the sum of errors is basically the algebraic sum of forecast errors of all periods. Now, basically, we have an expression for bias, which is bias is equal to algebraic sum of forecast errors of all periods divided by the number of periods. If forecasts are repeatedly overestimates, bias will have a positive value. Similarly, if forecasts are consistently underestimated, bias will end up being a negative value. For a very accurate forecast, both mean absolute deviation and bias will be zero. It is preferable to choose a method of forecasting wherein the mean absolute deviation can be controlled and brought nearer to zero. Lowering the mean absolute deviation will reduce bias also. Now next, the cost of forecast errors. Now important decisions, short-term, medium, and long-term, are based on forecast. Large errors of forecast can lead to costly mistakes, particularly when used for evaluating investment proposals that are long-term and nearly irreversible. Errors may be either in direction or in magnitude. In some situations, errors in direction can be crucial, while in other cases, errors in magnitude may be more damaging. It is always difficult to complete the exact cost of forecast error. It is advisable that such estimating of cost be undertaken, however approximate it may be, just to have an idea of how much it is going to be. Now, demand forecasts form the basis for production and inventory management, can be evaluated on the basis of their impact on the overall manufacturing cost. Thanks to powerful computing facilities available nowadays, we can work out we can simulate and find out the possible reduction in cost that we could achieve if we had more accurate forecasting tools. Now, next, the fourth item, cost and accuracy of forecasts. It is perhaps easy to visualize a relationship between percentage error of forecast and the cost involved in selecting, adopting, operating, and maintaining that particular method of forecasting. If we use qualitative methods of forecasting, these would entail less effort and expense, but would also yield forecasts with higher percentage error. If we use time series and other mathematical techniques, cost would increase, but it would also reduce the percentage of errors. Similarly, using more sophisticated statistical tools shall further improve the accuracy of forecast. Correspondingly, cost of operating and maintaining these forecasting techniques will vary and basically would be low when errors are low, but cost would increase if we have to base our planning and decision making on account of larger margin of errors. So to summarize, we can say that we've gone through the different method. We've looked at the importance, and we also look at the different methods of forecasting demand. So we kept it general, right? Now, in summary, we can say that economic and financial evaluation of an investment proposal must always be used on reasonably accurate market and demand analysis for forecasting. Now, depending upon demand pattern, length, that is time horizon of forecast, level of noise, and degree of accuracy required, uh, based on all those factors, a suitable method of demand forecast should be selected, as cost of operating not so accurate forecasts can also be exorbitant. So you have to be aware of that, right? You have to choose something which is midway, so that you don't uh, expose too much money on a system that is less accurate in predicting demand forecasts. Now, although forecasts are usually made with the help of statistical models, individuals can use the past data intuitively and forecast future events, which we've seen. Now, the experience confirms that with a host of factors impacting on demand pattern, such as noise level, complexity of operation, amongst others, subjective approach can decrease the level of accuracy of the models. Forecasting models are more reliable methods of ascertaining demand, although a few individuals can consistently forecast better than the models. Now, this is again debatable whether to base yourself on individual opinions, perceptions, or go with a particular model, whether it is quantitative or qualitative model. So it is always a choice to make. Now, with that, we've come to the end of our lecture, and the last slide gives you some of the, gives you some documents that you can look for on the net, and it is about the forecasting models with respect to demand. So with that, we stop here, and we're going to take questions.